it's really important that we publicise the good tech that's happening out there and make sure that we're removing any bad tech. If we look at what we've seen in the newspapers over the last few years, there's been a lot of negative press about IT. So we have, for example, when we think about energy, people think about Bitcoin and how much energy it uses. It could be the same usage as a small country, such as Finland or Iceland, or even half of that of the UK. So, when we think about energy and try and put that into something that you can maybe imagine, um, 57 million tons of carbon dioxide from Bitcoin, which we would need to plant 300 million trees to offset. So that's a big impact. Worldwide, there are 7,000 data centers, and depending on which reports you read, currently they reckon about 3% of the world's energy is used by data centers, and that could be anywhere between 11 and 30% by 2030. So this isn't sustainable, and also data centers use a lot of water, 3 to 5 million gallons of water a day. That's the same as a town of 30 to 50,000 people. So we need to address this and see how do we be more responsible and sustainable. If we think about the environment and the e-waste that's generated, they reckon there's 50 million tons of e-waste every year. So again, if you like to put that into images, that would be the equivalent of one laptop being thrown out every second. And of course, e-waste contains a lot of rare metals, which are often can be toxic, and if that leaches into the groundwater, that could be bad for local animals and biodiversity, as well as might impact humans as well. So, and then lastly, another example of where we need to think about the AI. There was outrage in the UK during COVID when some students didn't get their university places because the AI algorithm decided that their grades weren't going to be good enough based on their postcode. So, we need to address that, and this is what the responsible computing framework can do. And by going through the questions in the assessment, that can help you realise which areas you might need to think about differently. So, in the assessment for impact, there are 3 areas that it covers. The first is how you define the purpose of your responsible computing initiative. And this is really important because you need to understand, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of my project? Why am I doing this? Can it be tied into your ESG reporting? Can it be tied into the UN Sustainability Development Goals? Is the work that you're going to be doing auditable? I think with a lot of work that's being done these days, from an ESG point of view, we're seeing the same rigor that we would expect from financial data. So do you have that setup that you can do that? And are you using it for social good? Is the work that you're doing creating a social value? And that leads into the second question. How do you assess the impact of your responsible computing initiative? And in this section, there's questions that will help you understand that better. So, how do you measure? What would be your KPIs? Do you have governance teams in place to review the projects that you're doing from an angle of misuse? Is anybody looking at the projects going, could this technology be misused? This might be something you've not thought about before, and certainly CTOs, that was coming up as one of the anxieties that I mentioned when we were first studying them, doing the surveys. Could it be used in a different way? And if so, how can you prevent that from happening? Also, is the governance team looking at the diversity? I mentioned that before. We need to make sure that we are having teams that represent the populations, and we're not introducing bias, unconscious bias to our IT projects. So that's all great. And then lastly, how do you communicate the impact of your responsible computing initiative? I think there's many studies out there that show that employees are very keen to work for companies that are working in sustainability, and also to attract talent. People are interested to see what you're doing. So by making sure that you can demonstrate that you are a responsible computing provider can help with those two aspects. So you need to think about how are you doing your internal comms, how are you doing your external comms, and how are you coming to your decisions? I think sometimes we have to be responsible and think what is the best method for the project. And I'll give you one example from IBM here. So when IBM decided to do a transformation within global real estate, and we were looking at which tool will we use to do our energy utility bills, capture our information so that we can help work out our carbon accounting. We actually analysed over 30 tools, and we went for a tool that wasn't an IBM tool because it was the best on the market. And sometimes you just need to have that strength to make those decisions and why you're using certain things. We were actually justified in doing that because a year later, last year, IBM Sustainability Software acquired that product. So you have to do what's right, and you have to be able to account for your decisions. And that, I think, if you do the survey, all of these different areas will help you understand what you should be thinking about when it comes to being a responsible computing provider.